Hey everyone, and welcome to a new episode of He's Not Wrong. I'm your host, Chad D, and we have a really special episode for all of you today because it's something that I've never done before, but it's what I'm calling a marathon episode. I have three amazing guests, and they all pretty much share the same mission. And that mission is spreading education and pushing for progressive policies in their local communities and states. So the first guest that we have is Drake Rainwater. He is an up-and-coming Gen Z Substack writer, and I mean, he is so smart. He is amazing. I had the idea to bring him onto the podcast after I did my Doug Jones episode because Drake has been following the podcast. He's been following Doug Jones, and he had somewhat of an issue with one of the answers that Doug gave with one of the questions that I asked. And he commented on it on YouTube, and he wrote a Substack post about it. And he was so eloquent in his words about pushing candidates like Doug to really speak to progressive economic policies. And so I brought Drake on to speak to that. I think it's really important for candidates that I have access to, and for people that listen to the podcast to hear from someone that is Drake's age himself, a 20-year-old who is fighting to make the state a better place. Candidates need to know what is mobilizing and energizing youth. And then we have Tabitha Isner. She is the vice chair for the Democratic Party here in Alabama. We're going to be talking about the new candidates that are running for the Public Service Commission. I talked about, on Mallory's podcast and Maggie's podcast, Pretty Furious. We talked about the political side of the Public Service Commission, Alabama Power. I then had Daniel Tate on to He's Not Wrong, and we talked about the policy side to it. And now I'm bringing on Tabitha, the vice chair of the state party, to talk about next steps, how people can get involved, about the candidates running all up and down the ticket on the Democratic side here in Alabama, in ways that you can all get involved, and how we can kind of bridge that gap to bring in Republicans onto our side. Because if Democrats are going to win, the numbers are not on our side. We're going to have to switch votes. So how can we do that? Tabitha addresses that in our conversation. And then I bring on Dylan Blaha. He is running for, he's very progressive. He's running for Congress in Illinois, and it was a conversation that I thought was fascinating because it's a grassroots campaign. He's not accepting corporate dollars or PAC money, and I'm very intrigued by his campaign because it has gained a large following on social media. People are flocking to him. He is pushing for those same progressive economic policies that you hear Drake speak about. So there's a lot of through lines in what a lot of the guests on this episode are talking about. And they all come from different backgrounds or different ages. They come from different parts of our country, and yet they're kind of speaking to the same thing. And so I thought it was a really interesting idea to bring them all together for this marathon episode. You know what? I just won't even continue speaking right now because I don't even want to waste any time, because it's a long episode, but it's a good one. So without further ado, I give you Drake Rainwater. His episode, there will be like a 10-second break. It'll go into Tabitha, and then 10-second break after her part. It'll go into Dylan. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Okay, Drake, welcome to He's Not Wrong. Thank you for joining me today. We were just talking a little bit before I pressed record about some of the Democratic candidates here in Alabama, the top of the ticket. And we were getting into a conversation about Will Boyd, and I feel like I know where this is going to go. So I just wanted to make sure that I captured this, and I want to give you the floor to give your thoughts on how important the top of the ticket is and the diversity in candidates that we have. Because I feel like we have fairly progressive, and then we have fairly moderate, and then we have a few in between that. So let's hear what your thoughts are.
All right. When it comes to Will Boyd, I don't want to critique the guy or anything, but I've seen his past performances. He's run, I believe, 4 times in 4 different general elections in Alabama statewide. And we have not really seen an excellent performance from Will Boyd. I think an important thing to come from the top of the ticket is perceived viability. Now, I think you can get that perceived viability from anybody, as long as you have the backing behind them. But we have not seen that from Will Boyd. I am not super confident in his ability to win the primary at this point. I think that I kind of wrote about Josh Moon as well and what he was saying about Will Boyd, which has been in the news and everything. I think that Will Boyd would serve himself well to run for a different office and to try to get name recognition. I think Doug Jones is gonna win this primary. I mean, it's pretty set in stone. He has the media appearances, he has the money behind him, he has the experience. He's won a statewide race. I think the top of the ticket is incredibly important. I think that's why it's good that Doug Jones is running. Now, I critique Doug Jones a lot, and
Yep.
we can talk. We're going to talk about that. But the reason why I critique him is because I think that he has a chance to win. I think that this is a massive opportunity for Democrats to win. And I think if we have a top of the ticket that inspires people to go out and vote, then we will see a massive shift statewide, because that's a statewide race where everyone's going to turn out to vote. And then, single ticket voting is a big thing in Alabama. We're just going to try to get people to vote Democrat straight down the ticket for everybody. And Doug Jones could be the guy that drives out that vote.
I think he is driving out that vote. What I fear though is almost like that Bernie effect with Will Boyd here in Alabama. What I've seen on social media, and I've talked about this a lot on TikTok, and there's a lot of people who have feelings about what I'm about to say. But what I'm worried about is his followers are so sold on Will that there's no other option other than Will. And if Will does not get the nomination here in Alabama, that they're just not going to even support the Democratic candidate, whoever that may be, whether that's Doug, Chad Martin, Yolanda Flowers. I think someone else qualified. I think his name's Jamel. Might be pronouncing that incorrectly. But whoever that is, if it's not Will, I'm worried that all of his progressive followers are not going to support the Democratic candidate. And there are a few people I have talked to who said they would rather Tuberville be in office than vote for Doug Jones. And I lack the vocabulary to express how angry that makes me and how frustrated I am that people think that having Tuberville in office is better than Democrats making a bit of progress in a state that they have not won a statewide office in decades.
So I take issue a little bit with some things that people say about it. I definitely do agree that if whoever wins the Democratic primary is who we should vote for. I think that's a good thing, and that's why I support a contested primary. I'm not one of those people that's going to say we need to clear the field for Doug Jones. We need a contested primary. Yep. But if your candidate doesn't win the primary, I mean, it's Tommy Tuberville, who is one of the worst senators in America. He's completely Islamophobic and all these other issues that are wrong with Tommy Tuberville, and he's trying to be the Trump of Alabama. We all know these things. So we need to go out and vote, not just for Doug Jones because we want Doug Jones to win, but because if we can turn out and show that there's potential for Democrats to win in Alabama, then we could see increased investment from the national party in Alabama as well, the same way that Georgia now was one of the most invested in states in the previous presidential election. And it actually shifted right the least, I believe, of all the swing states that went for Trump comparison to 2020. So these states are states, Alabama, that are potentially winnable. And I think a progressive candidate is part of winning. And that's kind of what I write about. But I think whoever wins the primary is who we need to support. And we need to, I believe that we should have a primary debate. Now, I don't think that that's going to happen, but I think if we have a primary debate and whoever wins the primary is who we should support. I agree with that. I think we need to show that Democrats can win. I 100% agree with that.
So I just had Doug Jones on the podcast, as all my listeners know. I talked about in the introduction before he came on here is that you wrote a Substack post that was in response to one of the things that he said in that episode. I want to give you an opportunity to talk about that because I asked Doug Jones specifically about what this topic. What would you have to say to the people who say that you're not progressive enough? And there was some debate amongst people here in Alabama that it was a dodge or that he was deflecting an answer and he just gave a canned response saying, it's a Big Ten. You had feelings about that. And so I want you to tee up for the audience what those feelings were. How did that make you feel when he said that? And why did you feel that way?
I think that we need to kind of talk about what we mean by when we say a Big Tent. Because when we call the Democratic Party a Big Tent, what does that really mean? Does that mean that we're going to be a party that tries to serve the most amount of people as possible? Mm-hmm. Or are we going to be a party that tries to serve the majority of people? Now, that sounds like we're saying the same thing, but it's not. When we're saying we need to serve the majority of the people, that means that we can stand with a group and we are okay with leaving some people out, which is in my what I dictate, what I say is that we should leave rich people, the wealthy, out of the equation, right? The Democratic Party has tried too much to appeal not just to the rich people, but to the upper middle class, the upper people, not the working class. So I say we need to be a party of the majority. So when I say Big Tent, I think the biggest tent possible of people that we can actually win over are going to be the people of the working class. That's the biggest tent there is the people that are the working people. And I think the language that he uses kind of gets in the way of mobilizing those working class voters.
So I want to bring up a few numbers real quickly because one thing that I'm going to talk about with Tabitha Isner, who's coming on directly after our conversation, is about this idea that Democrats have winning policies. We know that from case studies across the country, but Alabama is such a unique place when it comes to Republicans and Democrats. So I just want to read off a few of these numbers. So we have, as of 2025, we have a total of 3.5, almost 3.6 million registered voters. Democrats have 1.3 million registered voters. Republicans have nearly 2 million registered voters. There are unaffiliated 309,000 voters. So even if every registered Democrat voted, every unaffiliated voter voted Democrat, we still fail in numbers when it compares how many registered Republicans there are. And so I know there's a whole thing about mobilizing the base and getting people to show up to vote. But just by looking at just the numbers of registered voters by party affiliation, we have to be able to pull some of those votes from Republicans. But something that I have been seeing so much online is just this idea that Democrats are evil. I was told 5 times today that I'm evil because I'm a Democrat. I was specifically sent an email saying that I agree with you. You make solid points as it relates to the Public Service Commission and all the content I've been putting out about that. But I would never vote for a Democrat as long as I live. And so I understand that there's these populist ideals that win across the country, but I want your opinion on, do we run on populist ideas first and hope people recognize that Democrats have the winning policy, or do we have to like start convincing people culturally Democrats are not evil in order to get to a place where we can have progressive ideals?
Okay. I think about this all the time. I love this question. I love this setup. And I'm going to try to cover all this because this is a very complicated question that goes specifically into the fact that, you know, people see that are not from Alabama. They see Alabama as just a culturally conservative state. There's nothing more to it, but it's much more complicated than that. If you look at Alabama's history, all the things that went on here, so much different movements were started here, different political ideologies. I mean, the biggest third party candidate probably in the last 100 years was George Wallace, who was, you know, from Alabama. So, and he won several states as a Dixiecrat, an absolute racist, right? But he was a populist candidate. That populism has always been centered in the South, the working class. And I do believe that there's an issue when we talk about polling of why Alabama votes the way that they do. A lot of people, they get frustrated because, you know, consistently nationwide, and I bet even if you polled Alabama, people would say that their number one issue is economics. That's what they care about most, is affordability. But then people will vote for Republicans, which clearly have been against affordability and the average person in terms of appealing to those people and making policies for those people. So why do they vote for Republicans, even though they claim to care about economics, even though the economics are worse under Republicans? Yeah. It's because, yes, we are a culturally conservative state. And what they've been able to do is they've been able to weaponize their cultural conservatism to say, yeah, we're culturally conservative. And the reason why your economic hardships exist is because of the fact that, you know, culturally conservative people, they're kind of against, they have in groups and out groups. They say this out group is the reason why your economics are bad. The immigrants or the trans people or the immigrants, whatever group of people, that's why your economic position is bad. And this has been able, in my opinion, to be so effective because ever since really Ronald Reagan and the third way Democrats that arose after Ronald Reagan, we've been proposing the same economic foundation that the Republicans have been. So when Republicans make an argument that say, oh, immigrants are the reason why our economy is bad, the Democrats respond and they say, well, no, it's not the immigrants. They say, no, it's not the immigrants. It's not this outgroup or whatever outgroup you want to say, whatever it is at the time. That's their response. But that response does not actually fill the void of why our lives are bad. It does not fill the void of saying this is the fault of the immigrants. When you say, no, it's not the fault of the immigrants, which is what Democrats constantly say, which I agree with, it's not their fault. But we do not provide an explanation or any sort of blame for why these conditions exist. So that's why I believe they perpetuate. Now, it's not something that is simple to solve, but really, what other solution really is there? And I think this is the issue I take with Doug Jones's campaign, which is that he says, and he does the affordability campaign, and he does this well. And he talks about, hospitals closing down. We need to expand Medicaid, the school funding, and the stuff with the Choice Act or the Choose Act.
Yep.
All that stuff is bad. But then he'll pivot and he'll say, we need to have a crowded table where everybody can sit together. Well, he's preaching culturally liberal attitudes when the culture is culturally conservative. Now, I'm not saying we should be culturally conservative, but we should redirect that to say, yeah, the problem is the private equity companies that are buying up rural hospitals and, firing a lot of the staff or cutting hours. And then we have some of the highest maternal mortality rates in the country because of this, or blaming other companies or blaming rich people and the people that have decided to spend $1 billion on a prison instead of funding our schools. That is something where people can say that is how that actually affects my life. And I believe once we start doing that, then we can start cutting through that cultural polarization. Sometimes the best way to win isn't through going through the front door. You have to find another way to do it to where you can get the economic policies you want. And then once you prove that your economic policies are beneficial, then you can start implementing that cultural stuff. And I believe that they go hand in hand. We've only been doing the cultural stuff without the economic stuff, and they have to work together for us to win.
So what exactly is it that you want him to stop saying tomorrow? And what would you argue that he should start saying? We've laid out why primaries are really important to have vibrant primaries. And if there's an opportunity to sway a candidate on policy or on a statement, now's the time. So what should he stop saying and what should he start saying?
Well, this is the benefit of Doug Jones, is that he's a national politician. He has the connections, and he's been on Midas Touch. I've seen every appearance that Doug Jones has done. I've been watching this guy religiously for the past 2 months since I started writing. So really what I'm saying is that we need to use our time effectively. When we go on and we say, hey, we need a crowded table, Alabama is not the scoreboard. I have Republican family members. I sent, Doug Jones's when he went to, he did his ceremony when he started his campaign kickoff. I sent that to my family and they were like, I really like the lottery idea. I like the stuff that he's talking about affordability. But then when he starts going into the crowded table stuff, then he starts seeming like an out of touch politician. That is how it comes off to people, is because people support these economically progressive things. There's polling that proves this. 56% of Alabamians, the Parka polls that Doug Jones talks about all the time, they believe that the rich people pay too little in taxes, the rich people, 56% of people. So we need to start talking about who we blame for our material conditions. Instead of saying we need a crowded table, Tommy Tuberville, he's too against Muslims. Instead of saying things like that, I'm not saying that we should never talk about those issues, but I'm saying when we are on a big platform, we should be using that to talk about economic progressive issues that it's shown that we have latent support for these issues already. So you got to use your time wisely, because that's the biggest thing that Doug Jones has. And every opportunity in a state like Alabama, we have to maximize it just in terms of strategy.
I'm curious how you separate failed messages from structural barriers like gerrymandering, the conservative media ecosystem that thrives in Alabama. I'm talking like 1819 News, Yellowhammer News, even though that's the title. They are not news. They're consultant organizations. I want people to understand that. You got your church network, straight ticket voting habits. How do you separate those barriers from failed messaging? Because I feel like a lot of times we do want to say that's a failed message, but there's a whole infrastructure of things that are set against people that keep them from being able to access democratic policies and candidates. And what do you say to that?
Okay, that's true. I 100% agree with that. We have gotten so far behind. I've seen Doug talk about this as well, is that, all these local media stations are all owned by the same people. They have the same scripts and say the same things. Yep. I agree with all that. That's something that we have to deal with. That is something that we have to look at going forward. But my strategy when I write, I'm not trying to separate messaging from anything else. I'm just saying within the current conditions that we exist in, I am trying to adjust our messaging to where we do not have to, concede on our values and we maximize our ability to win. So I don't disagree that those are things that we need to change. I'm not saying that all of this falls on Doug Jones or any candidate or Democratic leadership or anybody else. I'm just saying, if we're going to try to win, let's do all the things that we can control. Let's try to maximize all of those things. That's how I see it.
I still I agree with you, but there's still something in me that is like, the messaging can be right. We can run on these economic progressive policies. We can switch up how Doug Jones speaks. But how could we achieve any level of success democratically like they see in like a New York or a California if our party infrastructure and the credibility behind it just literally does not exist here? And you know what? I'm going to break the fourth wall on this one. I already recorded with Tabitha Isner to the listener, so I'm going to give you a preview. I can't even pretend I haven't even talked to her already, because I know previously I was saying I'm going to talk to Tabitha after. I've already talked to her. I'm just going to edit it in. And one thing that she was talking about is how she has not allowed the fact that she's locked out of the Democratic office to stop her, even though she is a party leader in the state, that they shut her out of leadership meetings. That doesn't stop her from supporting Democratic candidates in this state. And I feel like there's a level of, there's a revelation in what she said, and everyone will hear it in just a few minutes. But there's a revelation there that shows that like our party infrastructure truly is as bad as a lot of people say it is. So like how?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I'm not trying to, talk bad about the party leadership or anything, because that's a whole different organization and stuff. But I am a candidate for the state Democratic Executive Committee. I am running to be on the committee. I will be a part, hopefully, of some of these conversations as we go forward. I think, we could say what you're saying, and I agree with everything you're saying. I don't disagree with you at all. We're starting from not even zero. We're starting from negative 100 if we're really talking about it. Yeah. We're starting from nothing. So really what we need more Tabithas. We need more Tabitha Isners that are going to be organizing and showing what Democrats are really like. And instead of trying to, communicate to everyone, we make it very clear on who we stand with, and who we stand with are the working people of Alabama. And I think as long as we do that and we try, to respectfully move party leadership over to kind of being more focused on winning elections than power struggles in terms of the internals of the party, and letting people like Tabitha do her job, people that are trying to win. And there's a big issue with race in the Democratic Party of Alabama. They've been, a lot of white people are not in the Alabama Democratic Party, and there's definitely a racial divide within the party, but, and then, people like me, when I try to get involved, I get criticized. Like, for example, people will call people like me a Dixiecrat or something, which is something that I've seen many times, right? So we need to just be more accepting of what we're dealing with here, and that we're running a campaign Doug Jones is running a campaign. All Democrats are running a campaign trying to defeat people like Tommy Tuberville, which are blatantly, racist people. We are not on that side. If we were racist people, it would be much easier for me to get notoriety and power if I was a Republican, because I would have the infrastructure to be supported. So we just need to all work together. So as we're going into this next session where we're electing SDEC candidates coming up in May, go look at the people that are running for SDEC near you and communicate with those people. Or if you no one's running in your district, then try to see if you can get appointed whenever we go in session. We need more people that are going to be working together and not trying to argue all the time. So I agree with that. Tabitha's great. And I think we need more people like that to be able to rebuild the party infrastructure. And that this all goes together. This is not just a one size fits all issue. We have to do all of these things at the same time.
I'm really happy that you're running for the SDEC, and I'm happy that you're bringing up the issue of restructuring the party here in the state and the infrastructure for it, because it is something that I feel like is talked about a lot. It's been talked a lot about since 2018. I worked on Mallory Hagan's congressional campaign, And she's going to be so mad that I say this, but when in her concession speech, it was the S bomb heard around the world is what I call it. She dropped the shit bomb, and she was calling out the party leadership for not supporting candidates, and the fact that we have people who are running for the party leadership right now who are saying, no, we need to update this infrastructure to actually be supportive of all Alabamians. That's so important, and I'm happy that you are speaking to that. What, other than the governor's race, what other races are you paying attention to as we head into, or deeper into the midterm year, I should say?
So I'm not really looking into too many of the races. I've really been so focused on Doug Jones, but I will say candidates that I am excited for is obviously Tabitha, right? Tabitha's great. I love Robert Hunter. He's running up in Huntsville, near Huntsville. He's running in a district that there's a lot of potential for him in terms of being able to win there. And then also Mark Wheeler, who is a candidate for the United States Senate. I really like the way that he's messaging. I think that he has some great ideas. I think, a Senate race is a lot harder to win than a governor's race because it's a lot more nationalized, because a governor, there's a lot of ways, a Democrat can win a governorship in a red state, but it's a lot less likely that a senator, that we're going to win a Senate seat, right? But I still like Mark. I think he's a great candidate. I love the stuff that he's doing to outreach. He plays like D&D on TikTok streams. I think the guy's great. So I don't even know. I haven't been keeping up with really any of the races aside from the governor's race, because that's what has gotten me into local politics. Because me personally, I was always more interested in national politics up until when Doug Jones declared for the race, and I saw an opportunity that we could actually win this race and keep Tommy Tuberville out of office, because that was something that is really the most important thing to me is that we need to keep him as far away as possible from the governor's mansion.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, can't say that.
That would be bad. Yeah.
One of the, obviously the races that I'm paying attention to mostly is the governor's race, but the Public Service Commission. And I want to take every opportunity that I can to talk about the Public Service Commission. It's so insane to me that in 40 states, the Public Service Commission is appointed and not party affiliated, but yet in Alabama, they turned something that genuinely is not political into a political race. And I think, and I've talked to a lot of people on this podcast, I've talked to a lot of people behind the scenes, that I feel like the Public Service Commission is like the one race on the ticket that could really do outreach to all Alabamians to get them to flip a vote, because you don't talk about guns with the Public Service Commission. You're not talking about abortion. You're not talking about all of those hot ticket items that come with the races that you see for governor and Senate and the House. Like, that doesn't happen with the Public Service Commission. What is your power bill's too high, and how do you change that? So I'm really excited to be involved in that race going into the next year. I'd have to say that is probably tied with my enthusiasm for Doug Jones.
I've seen your stuff on the Public Service Commission, and I think you're doing great work talking about Alabama Power and the way that it hasn't been re-rated. And I've seen that website. I don't know if it was you who promoted it, but the one where you can calculate your power bill. And now I'm sending that all out to all my Republican friends and everything. I'm like, we're paying the taxes on this company's profits.
Is that not insane?
It's a monopoly where this is a company where we have no real other choice, and we have to pay the taxes on their profits. It's unbelievable. It's a government approved monopoly is what it is. And they are some of the biggest donors in races all across all across the state. Right. So there's a lot of entrenched power here and a lot of work that really needs to be done. And I hope that, we can make some more progress on this as we go forward, because the way I see it, it's electricity is a public good. I know I saw a podcast that you were on where you were talking about this, where there's some co-ops and stuff with electricity. And I think that would be great. These are utilities that everyone needs. The profit should be spent to reinvest back in the communities to actually build a better Alabama, instead of, going to whoever it goes to, right? Or to pay to reelect other politicians that support keeping them low. So it just is like an infinite cycle of money that really never benefits anybody at that point. So we need to be using this money to put it back into Alabama. And that's the same argument with the lottery and then several other things that we could, legalize in Alabama as we go forward or make more accessible.
What's really crazy to me, and I won't get too deep into it, but what's really crazy to me is the fact that, so So follow along, if you will. Yesterday, Jim Ziegler, former state auditor, announced his campaign for Republican for the Alabama Public Service Commission. Drake, he was a public service commissioner here in Alabama from 1974 to 1978. That was over 50 years ago. And he announced at 77 years old that he's running to get back on the Public Service Commission. That, like, what?
Hey, that means that he must have been around before the last time they re-rated the power bills.
Exactly. It's so crazy. And I just want everyone to, like, I need all of my listeners to understand what a rate review is. And it's the fact that, like, since 1982, Alabama Power has not opened their books, which if a rate review is done, they're literally laying out all of their receipts. It is a months-long process where the Public Service Commission is disputing all of these receipts. Is this receipt necessary? What did you spend this on? Is that justified for people to pay this rate in order for you to have this receipt? We don't know how much of their money is going towards advertising, political consulting.
Yeah.
Like, we just don't know. And so we could very well be paying for all of those things. And it's like people here, I think you might have seen the video or not, but an $1,100 power bill. A woman in a 3-bedroom home that was less than 2,000 square feet, she got an $1,100 power bill. Well, we already know a third of that went to profit and then the taxes on that profit. But out of that profit, how much of it is like going towards the political consulting to shoot down the Democrats who are running to do a rate review? It is insane to me. It's fascinating, but it's insane.
There's so many things within the state that need to be reformed to the point where it's really so much institutional power we're going up against here. So that's why I'm not trying to make it a simple argument, right?
Yeah.
Like, even in terms of local governments, there's almost no home rule in this state. So almost anything that you want to get done, there's no citizen-led ballot referendums.
Yep.
We cannot go around and sign a ballot and then put it on the ballot for whenever the elections are, right? So there's all types of things where this power is entrenched, and that's why I write about this stuff, is because we need to maximize every opportunity we have, because a blue wave simply is not enough in Alabama to win. We are not a state where we're within 10 to 15 points, which is possibly the shift that we're going to see in 2026 midterms, right? We lost by 30 points, right? So there's much more that we have to do to be able to win. Yep. And part of that is by, like you said, a powerful top of the ticket. But at the same time, you have to make people believe, even if they don't believe you're going to win, because a lot of people don't go out and vote because they don't believe that a Democrat's going to win anyway. Mm-hmm. But you have to make them at least excited to go out and vote for you. Because even if they don't think you're going to win, if you're excited by a candidate, you're going to go out and vote for them because you want to see more candidates like that. You want to see more people have to, capitulate to this progressive economic message or whatever the popular message is. So yeah, the Public Service Commission, just people this old probably shouldn't even be able to run for this office in the first place, or term limits or something. I don't know what it should be. I don't know if there is any term limits on it, but it's absolutely unbelievable.
He would be 81 by the end of his term. It blows my mind. But I'll save my rant for Jim Ziegler for another day. But Drake, final question. I want to know what it is that you're not wrong about.
I have a feeling that you know where I'm going to go with this, but
and I hope you do.
I'm not wrong about the fact that Alabama is is an economically progressive state. I am not wrong about this. There are 56% of people think that the rich pay too little in taxes. People think that, the Choice Act, the schools need to adhere to all these standards, but they're also small government at the same time. So why are we putting this money into it in the first place if we have to, create a whole nother board of people to adhere to the standards for the private schools, right? People want an economically fair Alabama. People want a lottery. These are things that people want. And that I'm right that is the way that we can win in Alabama, not through a crowded table, right? Which I respect Doug Jones, but I think the way to win, and I'm right about it, is a progressive economic focus message.
You know what? I just have to piggyback on that a little bit, because there are a few creators that I've talked to, and there are even more people who are just everyday hardworking citizens, and they fully believe that the way to beat Tommy Tuberville is not by running this, and I lack of a better word, but like kumbaya, everybody come together, really kind messaging, like you got to fight fire with fire.
Yep.
And right now, the messaging that Tuberville is using is clearly working. So you have to combat that with just as strong language. And I think that's really something that's interesting because that has been asked of Doug Jones. I believe it might have been either Kyle Whitmer or Josh Moon. One of them asked Doug Jones on their podcast about the language that you're using. And he believes that using this positive, unifying language, people will come to his campaign and he can win. And I think from this conversation, I think he needs to get a little bit more bold in the words that he's using.
I think it's outdated. I respect the guy. I respect him. But we are currently in a completely different situation than we were in 30 years ago. The respectability type of politics that he's talking about, that sort of thing, because of the material conditions that people are experiencing, because affordability has gotten so bad, people do not care about if you're culturally seen as a better person, because Doug Jones is a good person. He's a better person than Tommy Tuberville. I think anyone could look at it and say that. Even Republicans would probably agree with that. But people are still going to go vote for Tommy Tuberville because for whatever reason, they believe that Tommy Tuberville is going to make some sort of change, whether positive or negative, that might maybe improve the quality of their life. And that's what we need to focus on.
And Drake, you're not wrong about that. You are not wrong. And we're going to have you back on the podcast. I appreciate your time this weekend, and we will be talking to you here soon.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Tabitha, welcome to He's Not Wrong. I am so happy to have you on today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Chad.
Of course. Listen, I have been talking for a few episodes now about Alabama Power, the Public Service Commission. I was on Mallory Hagan's podcast, Pretty Furious, last weekend, where we talked about the politics behind the Public Service Commission and Alabama Power. And then the next day, I had Daniel Tate on my podcast, where we talked about the policy behind what the Public Service Commission can control, what they have in their power to make life easier on people in Alabama as it relates to energy. And so now I'm having you on to talk about the steps that we can take to actually make sure that we're doing what we need to do to support the people running for Public Service Commission, because it's something that I get in my comment section so much. People watching my videos, they're getting angry. They understand that there is a problem when it comes to regulating utilities in Alabama, but they always ask, what do we do? What are next steps? So when people say, what can we do? How do we get involved? Who do we need to call? Where do we start with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to start by saying, how great is it when people want to get involved? So many people, I think, want to complain about how it's not being fixed and don't want to get involved. And so just shout out to all the people who actually are looking for ways to get involved and be part of the solution. Obviously, electing new people to the Public Service Commission would be amazing. And I think we have a real opportunity in 2026 to do that. Having people on the Public Service Commission who are not beholden to the power company, who are not intending to build up their own power and influence and wealth by being in that position, but instead want to actually help the people of Alabama who pay these electric bills, that would make a huge difference. But it's not just voting in new people. Some other things that could be done for the Public Service Commission. One is open records, and often people aren't familiar with it, but it's equivalent to the federal FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. Yep. And so the state of Alabama doesn't love when people ask for information because it's a good old boys club that likes to operate in a smoky back room. But I encourage you to use that and encourage government to be providing you with information. Those often make the news when they go unanswered, as they often do, and are a good way to sort of get your head around what's the kind of information that you wish you knew about the Public Service Commission.
Yep.
And also, show up for their meetings and see how it actually works. For the ones that are public, they often kick out people who come to observe. And I think it's a powerful experience and a great photo op to just point to the lack of transparency in this state.
For sure.
And then the third thing I'll say is talk to your neighbors. Even if you don't know everything about the Public Service Commission, you can talk to your neighbors and say, I don't know everything, but I do know that our rates don't need to be this high, and that the people who are on the commission are visibly not trying to bring our rates down. We have this wild setup that allows Alabama Power to make crazy amounts of profit. And it shouldn't be like that. So even if you don't know all the details, just helping your neighbors to know that the Public Service Commission is affecting their lives via their utility bills, and that it doesn't have to be like this. It doesn't cost this much in other states. Just helping people to know that goes a long way towards shifting the general feeling in the air and our ability to flip these seats.
There's something that I want your opinion on, because in 40 states, the Public Service Commission is appointed by the governor. They're essentially nonpartisan positions that have to be appointed and then confirmed by their state legislature in order to serve the people. And so I don't want to say the problems that we're facing with the Public Service Commission is unique to Alabama, but it's unique to only a few states. I like the idea that 40 states have recognized that what's best for people when it comes to their utilities and their electric bill, it's not a political thing. It shouldn't be. What you pay each month for your electricity and the insight that you have into what your utilities are spending money on, that has nothing to do with whether you're a Republican or Democrat. And unfortunately, that's how it's set up in Alabama. So you have to play the game in order to change it. Republicans have had control of the Public Service Commission for so long now, and no change has come. Utility rates just keep going up, and it's putting a burden on people. One thing to piggyback off of what you said, it's so amazing to recognize that there's so many people who are now wanting to get involved and recognizing that there's a problem. But a lot of the people who are that I'm seeing, a lot of the people who are recognizing that there's a problem, they're really angry about their electric bills, are Republicans. They know there's a problem, but they're voting against their best interest. I've had multiple people in the past 24 hours tell me, I agree with you. You make really good points, but I will never vote for a Democrat as long as I'm alive. So there is this mindset that, yeah, you know what, things are bad, but I'd never vote for a Democrat. I've seen several comments where people are calling Democrats evil. And I'm concerned that we're focused too much on policy and not trying to change minds in order to get people to be primed and ready to vote for a position like the Public Service Commission that isn't traditionally political, like I was just saying. So just with all of that, where do you stand? How do we get those people who recognize what we're experiencing is an issue to actually just take a chance on a Democrat like who we have running for the Public Service Commission right now?
Yeah, it's a great point. Absolutely true. People can like a particular candidate, can like the policies that they're proposing, can like their general approach towards governing whatever position they're running for, and still that darn D, that darn R behind somebody's name can prevent us from seeing clearly what's going on. And I think that's a real tragedy of current American life. I think it's related to the fact that we have just kind of lost our fundamental understanding of civics, by which I mean our sense that like we as citizens are responsible for our government. There are rights, of course, that come with being a citizen, but there are also responsibilities. And we have not been talking about those nearly enough. So one of my favorite statistics is that in 1965, the average American was a member of 4 or 5 civic groups. 4 or 5. Now, in 2025, 2026, if you meet somebody who's involved in 4 or 5 civic groups, you would call that person a super activist.
Yeah, you would call them an extremist.
Yeah. Yeah. But it used to be that people were not only in Rotary Club, but like Rotary had a choir and a bowling league. And like that's how much people spent time together via those kinds of institutions. And so, sure, church might have been one of them, but like, you know, all of these organizations, the Elk and the Moose and the Oddfellow, like all of these organizations used to be how we came together as people, and got to know each other and know what was going on in our local communities and keep up with the intrigue and the drama and the potential changes that could happen. That used to be normal. And now I think people see social media and think that's keeping me informed. But given how it all works, like you're seeing people who agree with you primarily, and you're not having to interact with someone who you don't agree with politically. So I want all of us to be in a bowling league with a Republican, all of us Democrats to be in a bowling league with Republican. Like I want every Republican to be in a choir with a Democrat. Like whatever it is, we need to have opportunities to get to know one another, spend time with one another, and in organizations that we understand to be about community and civics. I think, I want everyone in Alabama to know a Democrat who's doing something positive for their community.
Yeah.
I know loads, but I'm shocked at how many people don't know a Democrat who's doing something good for their community. So I'm calling on Democrats to get involved in your local organizations, and take the time to get to know your neighbors, including and especially your Republican neighbors, so that they know someone who's doing something good for the community and identifies as Democrat.
I think that's a really interesting point that you make, because I swear I'm going to get emails from listeners who are mad at me for repeating myself in every single episode, but in every episode, somehow, some way, whether I bring it up or not, the guest will always bring up the importance of being involved locally. And I say that's like the B storyline to He's Not Wrong, is the importance of local community engagement. And so often all the guests that I've had on, from Hope Walls to Aaron Parnas, they've all made a point to talk about change starts at the local level, but like actually being involved in that policy making body. But you bring a different perspective on that local community engagement, saying like, if we go join a choir, we'll encounter a Republican, and that might be enough to change their mind so they know we're not evil. So when we say, hey, you know what? The Public Service Commission hasn't had your back for 20, 30 years. Give someone else a shot. They're actually listening to us and not shooting us down immediately. That, like, what a great new way to look at local community involvement and engagement. I love that.
I will say another great example of that. I had a terrible plumbing issue at my house. It cost me more money than I want to talk about to get it fixed. I had to go through the foundation, the slab foundation of my home, and replace all the pipes under my home. Total nightmare. And it started with having to replace a pipe in my front yard. So you could see a ditch in my front yard when the repairs were beginning.
Yeah.
Well, recently I started seeing ditches in other people's yards in my neighborhood. And I was like, I didn't warn my neighbors. I should have warned my neighbors. Like, of course, if it's happening to my house, it's going to happen to other houses in the neighborhood. So I started going around and knocking on neighbors' doors and saying like, hey, I see that you've got this ditch, or, hey, you don't have that ditch yet, but the one in your neighbor's yard, like, we should talk about how that happens. So we had a little community gathering, and we talked about how all of that comes to be. And we started talking about like, well, do we call city council about this? Do we call county commission? What department should we be talking to about this? All of a sudden, we're talking about government. We're talking about civics. We're talking about leadership and accountability. But none of it started from a point of, here's who you need to go vote for. It all started from a point of, we have a problem in our community that we need to address. And, after a few conversations about our sewage issues, we then ended up, somebody in the group said, what really bugs me though, is how fast people drive on this street when there's that elementary school right there. So now our conversation has morphed into a conversation about, could we put in a speed bump? Who do you have to talk to in the city to get a speed bump done? Like, and these are, again, politics, partisan politics has not come up once, but we're getting to know one another as people who care about our community. And that I think is so, so powerful. And so the next time I put a Democratic sign in my yard, people won't just think, oh, that lady. They will think, that's the lady that helped me out with that sewage problem. That's the lady that I worked with on the speed bump. Like, that's how we move forward as a community. And I wish it were simpler. I wish it were a simple Facebook post, a simple, video. But I really think we have to do something with our neighbors, break bread with them, solve problems with them in order for our country to heal.
I agree. That's really validating to hear also, because yesterday I was in the car with my boyfriend and I had this thought, and when I get a thought, I hyperfixate on it and I can't stop until I start writing it out and I figure everything out and who would be involved and whatever. So the thought that I had was, I was like, I want to go on a tour across Alabama to the major Democratic cities and go to local groups and just have a tour of, is your utility bill too high? Here's what you do. And start informing people of the Public Service Commission that way, in this nonpartisan way, informing people of their rights, of the reality that they're facing that they might not have known the details on before. And hearing that it just takes talking to someone person to person and having these conversations just is enough to move the needle on something. It really makes me want to start planning these events, Tabitha. I want to give you a lot of credit right now, because you ran for Congress in 2018. And ever since that race, you've hit the ground running, from running for office in the state party leadership to really making sure that every single spot on a ballot's filled up. And I know there are some I think state legislature seats that still are unopposed, but for all accounts and purposes, we have the most competitive Democratic ballot in the longest time that we've seen. And I credit that to you for the work that you've done. And I mean, kudos to you for literally hitting the ground running and making sure everyone felt included in this process. I just want to know how that went. Where are we? Qualifying ended yesterday. How are you feeling as we start now heading towards May 19th, the primary day here in Alabama?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited. We have so many candidates. It is definitely the most candidates that we've had since 2018. I have to do some more checking to see if we beat 2018's numbers, but it has been a slog. And I again, want to go back to, I mentioned this earlier, like, people who want to do something about the problem.
Yeah.
Those are the heroes. Like, if you don't know yet what to do, fine. But if you want to do something about it and not just complain about it, like, you are my people, I like you, I will help you find something to do about it. And so I've spent the last year trying to find people who are saying, I want to do something about it, and then help them to see themselves as a candidate. And really, the hardest part about that is that people tend to think that a candidate is somebody who is an attorney, a doctor, that they need to be at least middle-aged, like me, if not older, that they need to have had all of these experiences, and they need to know everything about legislating or governing in whatever context. That people count themselves out so quickly. And it's tragic to me, because it's an example of how we've come to understand politicians as like this whole other category of people distinct from us. And so it means that we don't step up to run, but it also means that we treat politicians like they're not humans.
Yeah.
And so, I see people screaming at politicians, but not recognizing that, like, also could call them. I know Katie Britt doesn't respond to stuff. Many of our members of Congress and US Senate don't respond very frequently or in a very quality way. But certainly at the local level, like, you can probably just get a hold of your state rep, your state senator, and have a conversation with them. And that's a form of advocacy that I think, again, we've lost touch with. But I hope people will do more of that, because seeing your neighbor, seeing your friend run for office, hopefully helps people to understand that these are not alien people.
Yep.
These are our neighbors. And I'm really excited about the primary. We're going to have a very exciting primary, a number of matchups for people to get excited about. Hope people will recognize that it's not that after the primary, we all get together behind a single candidate, and your candidate may not win, but it's still wonderful that all these candidates were on the ballot. So looking forward to seeing, really looking forward to November, where I hope to see big things happen. But it's a fun period to have an actual primary happening on multiple races.
I know. I think having a primary really allows, having a strong primary, number one, sends a message, but it really allows people to do their research and to feel seen and to get excited about a candidate. I mean, I'm so happy that we're having really vibrant primaries in Alabama coming up. And I mean, to your point, you truly were on social media and in person and traveling, doing whatever you needed to do to find people to fill spots. And I mean, it's no secret. I told a lot of people that I was considering the Public Service Commission, but I think it was 9 o'clock one night, and I said, hey, I'm considering running for office, and you jumped on the phone immediately. And so it just cannot be underscored enough, the hard work that you have done to make sure that we have a strong Democratic showing in Alabama this year is paying off. And so I thank you a lot for that, Tabitha. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Now I want to transition into speaking about the governor's race for just a second. And I wasn't going to bring this up, but I think it's really important to talk about today after the second shooting that we've seen ICE commit in Minnesota. And I know there's a lot of people in Alabama who are probably like, well, Minnesota's so far away. Like, we're a red state. That's a blue city. Like, we have nothing to worry about. But I am concerned because you have Tommy Tuberville, who uses really inflammatory language, and he supports military and ICE on the streets of blue cities. He's threatened it in Birmingham and Montgomery on numerous occasions. He, as everyone knows, he's running for governor. So if he was to win, that's a reality that Alabama could be facing. So we should be paying attention to the news in other states, because that's the reality that we could be experiencing very soon. We have several people running for governor here in Alabama, and I know you can't comment on who you would support or whatever that looks like. Everyone knows that I'm a Doug Jones supporter. I think it is my belief that Democrats have to prove that they can win an election in Alabama first, and then more progressive policy can follow. I've talked about that a lot on here. But whether it's Doug Jones or it's Will Boyd or Chad Chigmartin or Yolanda Flowers, what is the message that they need to understand when it comes to fighting against Tommy Tuberville and the language that he's using? So I just want to know what you want all the candidates to know when it comes to the reality and the stakes and facing off with Tuberville.
Yeah. Tuberville is a terrifying possibility. I think he's made it clear that the Muslim community would not be safe in Alabama. I fear for the Jewish community. I fear for any minority community under his leadership, because I think he takes pride in being sort of exclusively focused on white evangelical Christianity as a culture. Yeah, I think there's a lot of reason that we need to take that race extremely seriously. He doesn't live in Alabama. Everybody wants to talk about that. I get it. It's annoying. And like, the legal machinations will happen. Do not worry. There will be complaints lodged about that and challenges, etc. But the fact of the matter is, he is almost certainly going to be the Republican nominee. And if you're not an attorney, like, the thing that you can do to be helpful is not lodge a lawsuit against Tommy Tuberville in residency. Like, what you can do to be helpful is help people to understand in easy to understand ways what the stakes are here. And I think, I care about the Muslim community because I have Muslim friends.
Yeah.
But if you don't have Muslim friends, that's probably not a compelling argument, worrying about what Tuberville will do to the Muslim community. But so I think the trick, anytime we're talking about persuasion, anytime we're talking about building our coalition, is to find out what someone else cares about, like really give them an opportunity to talk and tell you what they care about, and then look for the pieces that you can expand upon in a way that will help them see how Tuberville's a problem. So, religious freedom might be something you can talk to people about.
Yep.
Like, Tuberville has a very narrow definition of what counts. And like, we've all got friends who don't go to church. Like, what if he starts making people go to church? Like, I'm not saying he will, but I'm saying that's the kind of direction that we're headed in. So it is no easy task. And I think there's a lot of debate right now within Democratic circles or leftist circles about how candidates should run. Should they run moderate? Should they run progressive? How combative and aggressive should they be? And I really think the answer is you have to run as you. And that's what I try to tell every candidate. It's like, if your nature is to be really conciliatory and like always look for both sides of an issue and try to have common ground, then run like that. And if your issue is to like tell it like it is and like use, foul language, expletives, you need to be authentically you, because no one ever wins pretending to be something that they aren't. You may not win, but I do think authenticity is essential. And in the era in which Mamdani and Trump are both wildly popular, I think the common thread there is they are who they say they are.
Yeah.
Those are authentic politicians who aren't hiding from that. I would say Tim Walz is also. Jacob Fry. We see lots of politicians who our instinct is to like them because you sure know where they stand. Yeah. And so I think it's less, I would recommend worrying less about, as a candidate, worrying less about, do I need to moderate? Do I need to be progressive? Do I need to be whatever? And worry most about being yourself, because being consistent and knowable is the most important thing to voters.
I fully agree. And, they say the Democratic Party, and you've said this too to me, that the Democratic Party is a big tent. And so we need a whole slate of candidates covering one end to the other to allow people to have a choice. And I think that's important. And it's important to note that like Mamdani works in New York City because that's what the people of New York City, like the Democratic coalition up there, they worked hard to get to that point. Mamdani might not work in Alabama, but we're laying the groundwork to where one day maybe we could. Maybe if we had someone authentic like Mamdani and all the groundwork has been done, like that would be a future and a possibility that we would have here. And that really excites me that we're finally laying the groundwork for those kind of candidates to be able to thrive and flourish and have their voices heard.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the candidate who brings people together, brings together the biggest coalition of people wins. Yep. What does it mean to get the majority of votes if not that you brought together the biggest coalition? Yep. That's really all it is. And when we go to build a coalition, there's the people who always vote. And then if you want to win, you're going to have to find some new people. So either that's persuading some Republicans to come vote for you as a Democrat, or that's persuading some people who usually stay home to get off the couch and come. Or it's, there's a number of ways to do that, but somehow we have to grow our coalition. And I think that having such a diverse set of candidates is growing our coalition.
Yeah. So
I just hope and pray that our candidates will be growing that coalition in a way that benefits the whole party, the whole sort of resistance to the current hyper-conservative extremist agenda. Hopefully we can all work together in a way that builds that coalition and results in victory.
Yeah, same. Listen, it's been a concern of mine on social media because it's such a divisive place. that there seems to be a lot of people in the state who really want their candidate to win. And it's my hope that after the primaries, it can be seen that, no, we're all in this together. Your candidate might not have won. My candidate might not have won, but like, I will support the Democratic nominee. I know that they might not be who I like fit my mold, but that's progress, and I will support them. And I want, no matter who wins and whatever the outcome is in May, I hope that we can all come together and still recognize that, like, no, like, we're still moving the needle forward, and we all need to support each other and come together to support the Democratic ticket, no matter who it is that gets the nominations up and down the ballot.
Absolutely. I will say there are many things about being in party leadership that are terrible. But one really fun thing, one really great thing about being in party leadership is that I'm not allowed to endorse in a primary. And I didn't think I was going to like this, but I really like it. And I think I'm going to, it's something that I want to continue long past party leadership, in the sense that I still think you can say a lot about candidates without, like, it has forced me to find ways to celebrate every single candidate for what they bring to the table without rejecting their gifts. And I think too often we don't know how to endorse the candidate we like best without slamming on some other candidate. Yep. And the reality is that's not how coalitions work. Like, we're picking one member of the coalition to be the leader, to be the one who moves forward and represents us, but we are not trying to destroy everybody else. And I hope that people can keep that in mind. And being required to stay neutral in primaries, it doesn't mean that I don't have people I like better.
Sure. I
have opinions. I have preferences. I have ideas about who I think would be better or worse as our candidate, but I can always come up with things that I like about someone and resist the urge to say the thing that I don't like about somebody else. And that's a really been a really positive practice in my life.
I think we can all probably take something away from that and start applying that to how we view politics and our candidates. I know I will. That's important. But Tabitha, we've made it to the final question. It's the question that I ask all my guests. What is it that you're not wrong about?
I'm not wrong about the fact that the Democratic Party is not defined by its leadership, but by its grassroots volunteers and activists. If you're mad at the Alabama Democratic Party, fix it. It's not just the people at the top who make the party good or bad. I'm proof that, I'm vice chair, but I'm locked out of the office and excluded from leadership meetings. And nonetheless, I have had an extraordinary impact on making this a better party here in Alabama.
You have 110%. You have.
Yeah. You don't have to have a title to make things better in the Alabama Democratic Party. I'm not wrong.
And you know what I'm not wrong about? I'm not wrong that we would not have a full slate of candidates for people to choose from if you were not who you are. And regardless of being locked out of meetings or the office, you persevering has made our state so much better and vibrant. And I thank you for that. And I appreciate the time that you've given me on the Saturday. I know you're running for state Senate, and this is eating into your call time, that valuable call time. So I'm very appreciative that you've made the sacrifice to give some of that up to share it with our audience today. And we'll be in contact, and we'll be keeping up with your race as the months go on.
Wonderful. Thanks, Chad.
Dylan Blaha, thank you so much for joining us on He's Not Wrong today. We are so excited to have you. You're running for Congress in Illinois' 13th congressional district. We're going to dive into who you're running against right now in the primaries a little later in the episode. But before we get into that, I just want to know, how's the campaign going for you?
It's going really well. I mean, I didn't really know anything about fundraising, especially grassroots fundraising, before this campaign began. So that's definitely been the toughest part. But We've been knocking doors every day. We've been phone banking every day, and we're just rolling right along. The election is March 17th, so it's coming up quickly.
Have a
Yeah.
very interesting path to how you got into politics, and you started in the military, and you were a cancer researcher. So walk me through how you went from military biochemist, cancer researcher into running for Congress in Illinois.
Yeah, I mean, I've always just done jobs where I wanted to help people, so that's really what led me here. But like you said, I enlisted when I was 19. I dropped out of college after my freshman year because I couldn't afford it. And so I joined the military, and that was the way I was able to pay for my bachelor's degree and then eventually for my master's degree. But other than that, yeah, I deployed to Afghanistan from 19 to 20. I served in Germany for 3 years, helping Ukraine after Russia invaded them, and then helping NATO update their war plans accordingly. And but yeah, I got back in late 2024, and I had a feeling that Trump was going to win. He did.
Yeah.
And then I started to look at the Democratic Party and their lack of fight back, and it really led me to where I am now.
When did you first feel the gap between how the system works, who it serves, and who it underrepresents?
I would say about 10 years ago was when, so when I was in college, I graduated with my bachelor's in 2016, and I would say around that time was when I started to realize, and I started to pay more attention when Trump was running the first time. But at that time, I used to just say that, I don't think the government can keep up with everything that's going on, especially with technology. They're not regulating it, they don't know how, and everything in the world is outpacing government regulation. But more recently, I have really learned how much money in politics really influences a lot of American policy, and ultimately that's why I'm running. There's um, you know the Democratic Party's ties to Israel and their support of their genocide in Gaza. The fact that most of them can't say Medicare for all because they take money from health insurance companies. I mean, those are the reasons why I'm running.
I want to take it back to what you just said about your belief that Donald Trump was going to win this election. Why did you, what made you feel that he was going to win?
I think a lot of it was really just the lack of putting up a worthwhile candidate. And part of it was definitely Biden for not getting out early, but another part of it was just not putting out a candidate that had strong policies that people could believe in. And like I said, I think Kamala didn't distance herself from Biden with Israel and Gaza. She didn't distance herself from Biden on pretty much anything. And then they brought up Liz Cheney, and I was like, all right, we're cooked.
When you were serving overseas, I feel like you were in a really unique position to see how governments might weaken or fail based on leadership. And then you were able to bring that back to America. So what did serving abroad teach you about how governments like ours, democracies, weaken from the inside?
Well, I think we've seen for years that a lot of countries have decreased their investments in NATO, and a lot of that was just the fact that they didn't think that they needed to invest in their own self-defense because they thought that America was going to bail them out of anything.
Yeah.
And ultimately that's the wrong decision. I am anti Team America World Police and that mindset overall. I mean, I think we need to end American military imperialism abroad. And it's good to focus on defense and train to help our allies out in a pinch, but at the same point, we should not be pouring $1 trillion into the defense budget. We should reallocate a ton of that money, at least $100 billion, into education and healthcare, and things like that.
Did I read correctly that you had your security clearance revoked recently? Is that true?
It's been suspended right now. So I made 2 videos. One was in late August when Trump threatened Chicago.
Yep.
And the second was in late September when Trump threatened Portland to send the National Guard there. And in those videos, I reminded service members to disobey unlawful orders, that they had that duty. It's part of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. But yeah, the military didn't like that, and they've been trying to find ways to get me in trouble ever since. So I do not have my security clearance back, as far as I know. And I was under investigation. They found about 9 things that I violated, but the all of them are ridiculous.
No, it is ridiculous. I think that shows how they view what they're doing. They know it's wrong, right? They if what they were doing was so right, they wouldn't have to do things like that to people like you, to people like Senator Mark Kelly. I think is absolutely ridiculous. But how do you reconcile that discipline of military service that's instilled in you when you join, and that obligation to question authority in the way that you did when you made those videos?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, like I said, I raise my right hand to defend the Constitution and protect the American people. And what's going on right now is not normal. And some of the things that have been going on right now, like what's going on with ICE, they've been boiling up for years. And they haven't just been getting bad with Democratic president or with Republican presidents. They've been getting bad with Democratic presidents too, you know, especially with ICE. But what we're seeing right now is overt and it's fascism. And if we don't speak out, then it's just going to keep consuming us. And there is a culture of fear in the military where everyone says, well, I don't want to speak out. I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to lose my benefits. I just want to, you know, stay here and retire. And unfortunately, this is what we signed up for, to fight fascism.
I've had several guests on who have served in the military before, and you are now the third guest, I believe. You all talk about that oath of office, what it means to you personally, what it means to your love of America, the direct tie that it has with defending the Constitution. I believe our servicemen and women and the people in our intelligence community, y'all understand the Constitution, I think, better than most. What do you think Americans are missing right now when it comes to understanding the Constitution? And I mean that as to be an educational question, because I feel like being in Alabama, I'm constantly trying to educate people and to fill them in on what is actually in the Constitution. And just because you believe something's unconstitutional doesn't make it unconstitutional. It's pretty black and white. And so what do you think people are not understanding about that?
Yeah, I think ultimately America was an experiment in democracy, right? I mean, it was a lot of the smartest minds at the time sat down and wrote this Constitution based on Rome, Greece, and democracies of history's past. But that doesn't mean it's perfect, and it does need to evolve with the times. So I think it's important, things like freedom, opportunity, equality for all Americans. Like that is something that is inherent in the Constitution. And ultimately, I mean, we see it with the First Amendment as far as free speech. We see it with the Fourth Amendment. We see it with the 14th Amendment. I mean, ICE is violating it all by taking people without due process. And these are freedoms that ultimately we need to fight for. And it's sad that it's gotten this way, but I think a lot of people, you know, myself included, I'm 32 right now. We grew up in a world where we didn't think there was going to be a big war again. We thought we were just going to have to worry about, you know, are the Bears going to beat the Packers this weekend? They did, but that's not everything that we need to worry about, you know? No, Nikki has actually voted very poorly on immigration in general. It was one of the first reasons that I started to pay attention to her. So she voted for the Lake and Riley Act, which allowed ICE to take people without due process, essentially, just if they're accused of a crime rather than convicted, which is a huge difference. But she's also voted to thank ICE in that other bill that happened in 2025. And luckily, I mean, I've been very vocal. And today she signed on to co-sponsor the bill to impeach Kristi Noem. So I hope that's me making a difference. And I hope she continues to have better votes on immigration. But if not, I will push her to.
In my experience, seeing this kind of stuff, it's like almost like great vote today, but too little, too late. Too much damage has been done for you to start walking back previous votes or what you've been the party to.
I think a lot of it is that the Democratic Party as an apparatus they try to fall in lockstep and they don't fight back. So they just cave in to Republican rhetoric over and over and over again. But in this case, they got it wrong. You know, I mean, polling with immigration was pretty bad because there's just been so much propaganda over the years. But the same amount of people that wanted to increase immigration enforcement also were in favor of mass amnesty. They just wanted a solution. And now immigration is polling better than it ever has before. And so, I mean, it's the same way with fighting for trans rights it's one of those things where you have to stand up for what you believe in. And it's ultimately like that's the biggest reason why I am primarying her, and that's why I've condemned the Democratic Party when it comes to defending their constituents.
I want to talk about that pushback to the Democratic establishment that you're giving here in a few minutes, but I first want to ask about take it back to ICE and how prevalent it is right now in the Midwest. What's the word been on the ground with your constituents about what they're doing? Or has anything negative happened in the Chicago area? Or people just kind of like, is it getting to that point? Everything's so inflamed right now with what's happening in Minneapolis that I think it's putting a lot of other communities, obviously on alert, and it's scaring them. So I'm wondering how's your community handling all of that?
I think it's important to note that ICE hasn't left Chicago. ICE hasn't left LA. And every day we have to worry. I mean, just the other day they started going door to door. So this is like, 1930s, 1940s Germany stuff. And it's not as bad and as prevalent in my district is more of central Illinois. And part of that could be because we're over the 100 miles from a border. So CBP can't operate here as much, but we still have we had 22 he's been in America for 22 years. His name was Ishmael, and he was recently just grabbed after dropping his daughter off at school for the day. And these are small towns, and I mean, if anything, it's helping people wake up and go, oh wait, I thought you were going to take the criminals. Ishmael's lived in town for 22 years, and he's a staple of the community, and it's pissing people off. So, and rightfully so. So, we're building community, and we're organizing every day, and that is what we need to do to stand up to Trump and succeed in the future.
So now I want to talk about that Democratic establishment because, like you said, you want big money out of politics. You're the person that you're challenging right now in the primary there in the 13th congressional district in Illinois. One thing that I've been grappling with recently here in Alabama, just to bring you up to speed real quick, is the fact that we have a candidate running for governor, Doug Jones, who is fairly moderate, but he energizes the Democratic base here in the state. And then you have a few other really progressive candidates who have zero name recognition. They're not raising a lot of money, and there's not a lot of energy behind them. So I'm grappling with, I'm fairly progressive in my ideals and my thought processes, but I don't want Tommy Tuberville to win the governor's race here in Alabama. So I think Alabama should have to, prove that it can elect a Democrat before we go super progressive. But the thing that I've been grappling with is this thought that the Democratic Party is a Big Tent party. But then when you look at places like Illinois where you're running, you are very progressive in your ideals, and you are unwavering in what you stand up for. And you've gained a large following because you are using your voice in a way that benefits all people. So I want you to speak to that a little bit about when they say it's a Big Tent party, but then what you've learned and running for Congress and the reaction from people that they've been giving you ever since you've started using your voice.
So one thing I want to touch on for a minute is just the fact that, in my opinion, Republicans have bad policies that hurt their constituents, but a lot of establishment centrist Democrats have no policies. And so what the progressive movement is really offering is good policy. But with that, the hurdle of money in politics is insane. It's one of those that, so I've raised about $64,000 this cycle, 100% grassroots, just mainly through social media. And at the end of the day, that gives you a viability score that some of the bigger organizations out there, that's kind of their big hesitation of, oh, we really like Dylan, but I don't know if he can win because he doesn't have enough money. And it's like, aren't we trying to get money out of politics, guys? But that's the hurdle, because I do think even in a Republican area, I mean, look at Bernie. He beat a Republican his first time.
Yep.
I think it is doable because ultimately a lot of the progressive policies are fighting for the working class that makes up the base of both parties. The problem is money, because I mean, even I've acknowledged that maybe I can, I hope I can win this time, but if not, I'll run again. And it has to be that way everywhere because it does take time to build that momentum. I mean, AOC won her first time with, I think, $81,300. So it can be done, but you have to have a lot of on the ground organizing, door knocking every day. And it's hard. But the last thing I don't want the Democrats to go forward and not learn their lesson because otherwise we will have another Donald Trump in 2030 or 2032 or 2032.
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. If there is a year where I feel like money, yes, it's very prevalent in politics, but in a year I like this, I don't think it's as important for campaigns than it usually is. I don't know why I feel that way. I just feel like there's a lot more people paying attention and they're not allowing their votes to be bought like they might have before. So I don't know. I feel like the position that you're in, if you're gonna be elected on grassroots campaign with small donor dollars, like this is the year to do it.
This really is. No, you're right.
So how do you realistically think Congress can undo Citizens United?
I think so. I mean, ultimately, so there's kind of two ways of thinking about it, right? Because I mean, ultimately, I'm for the public funding of elections. I want shorter election cycles because I do think it is crazy that as a representative, you get elected and you have to immediately start running again. I mean, you should be trying to work on legislation to better your constituents. But it's really the corporate super PACs that have made it out of control. There's always been money in politics to a certain degree, but if we can at least fight against that, I mean, it's crazy the amount of ways that it's impossible to see all these donors. And then you look at a group like AIPAC, they know that they have horrible brand recognition right now. So what they're doing is that their individual members are now going to donate to candidates, and it's going to be harder and harder to tell if a candidate is AIPAC funded or not.
We're not wrong when we say that this election year is focused on affordability. All the polls, it shows that people are voting based on their current economic conditions. That the reality that they're living, their energy bills are too high, their grocery costs are still too high. For a lot of people, their healthcare costs just quadrupled. There's some people in Birmingham where I live who quite literally their costs quadrupled. And that rightfully so, that's what's motivating them to vote. But one thing that I've seen a lot of candidates do is only talk about affordability. Yeah. And I feel like there's so much more that's on the line than just affordability. And you are a fearless advocate for the LGBTQ plus community. You were just talking about trans rights. You've talked about LGBTQ rights being human rights, and rightfully so. People need to be talking about it. They just tried twice within the past couple of months to try to overturn gay marriage at the Supreme Court. One, I guess one made it to the Supreme Court for consideration. The other one didn't even make it up that far. But still, they were trying, and not enough people are talking about it. And like I said, you are talking about these things, and people are listening and they're following. So we have a lot of candidates and other political talking heads that listen to this podcast. What do you have to say to them if all they're focusing on affordability? What are they missing in other areas?
I completely dislike the rhetoric that you have to focus on one issue and just ignore all the rest. I think it's important to have your stances and stick to it. I mean, look at Zoran. Zoran didn't stick to 3 points. He had 6 or 7 and it was continuous. But yeah, affordability is important. But how are we going to get there? Things like Medicare for all, things like affordable housing. But also, if we don't defend human and civil rights, if we don't defend women's rights, if we don't defend LGBTQ plus rights, they will go away. And ultimately, it's important, like, even for the people that need convincing, an attack on one is an attack on all. And so you need to dig your heels in now, because first they came for the socialists and I was not a socialist, so I did not speak out. Like, that will ring true, because first they came for the trans people and I did not speak out, is going to be the thing that Republicans are saying when they realize that Donald Trump has turned on them. So we need to dig our heels in, and we need to do everything we can. I mean, just the fact that every Democrat has not voted to impeach him right now is insane.
It is insane. And I had a conversation just a few weeks ago with Aaron Parnas, and I asked him about impeachment, and he has all of his sources on the Hill that are within the congressional and Senate offices. And I asked him, from what you're hearing and the people that you talk to, like, is impeachment going to happen? Is it a possibility? And he said impeachment is highly unfavorable right now. And I'm like, if there is ever a time to use the tools that the Constitution affords us, it's now. And if we don't, then what are we doing?
I mean, you would even prove to your base that at this point, all the Democrats are unified against Donald Trump. And that's something, whether you're a leftist or a liberal, that I hope people could get behind. But and that's the other thing too. I mean, I guess if I can get on a soapbox for 20 seconds
Do it.
is we need to stop fighting each other on the left, and we need to we need to come together in any way we can, find as many things that we're united on, and stick to our guns, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to fight back against fascism.
Yeah, I agree. I to your point about money in politics, I feel like if the Democrats could just kind of sort through, their economic policy, just sort through the economic policy, decide that you're going to stand for something, stop letting corporations and tech giants buy your voice and your vote and your platform, I feel like we could much more easily come together. I feel like it really does come to those economic policies. I could be wrong on that. On this podcast, I'm not wrong, as you know, but that's where I fall. Has Congresswoman Nikki, your primary opponent, has she accepted AIPAC money?
Yes. Yeah, she takes money from AIPAC, J Street, and DMFI. Yeah, I know that there are several representatives in Illinois that take AIPAC money, but have still signed on to the Block the Bombs Act that was introduced by Daley and Ramirez from Illinois. But Nikki refuses. So, and that's just offensive weapons. So, yeah, it's tough to see.
Dylan, as we round out our conversation, I ask all my guests the final question of, what are you not wrong about? So, Dylan, what is it that you are not wrong about?
I am not wrong about my positions on AI. I continue to say that we cannot allow for AI expansion at the cost of humanity. And that means our children's education, that means our environment, and that means jobs. I love the idea of AI being able to reduce a 40-hour work week to a 20-hour work week. What I don't love is the idea that a company cuts 50% of their workforce because of AI. And so that is something that I think when we talk about fighting oligarchy and not just authoritarianism, that is at the heart of it, is stopping this the use of our data that's constantly weaponized against us. And that is something I will take to the grave, that I am not wrong about.
No, you're not wrong about that. And here in Alabama, we have several of those data centers that are being built. One down in Montgomery right now. Here in Birmingham, there's a community outside of Birmingham that's getting a data center. And the one thing that I hate to see happen, and that it's my understanding that this is happening in a lot of states, and why they choose places like Alabama is because they allow for their power bills to be subsidized by the citizens in that state. So in order for that data center to operate, all of our power bills are going to go up, and it's at the cost of people who already can't afford life. And so it's going to harm the environment. It harms people's bottom line, and all for why. And I hate that. So you are not wrong about what you just said. I appreciate that. And Dylan, I appreciate you coming onto this podcast today. I wish you the best of luck as you head into your primary, and hopefully we'll be talking again after with a victory under your belt.
No, thank you for having me on. And if any of your listeners want to find out more about me, they can go to dylanforillinois.com. But no, thank you again for having me on today.